You're listening to the Retro Mo Podcast. I'm your host, Mo, and I love to play and review old video games and a few new games too. If you prefer to read instead of listen, check out my written reviews at retromo.substack.com. In this episode, I'll be sharing my experience with Perfect Dark for the N64, released in year 2000. I've scored this game 8 out of 10, a great game. An exceptional follow-up to GoldenEye that squeezes every drop out of the N64's capabilities. I'm thrilled to have finally completed Perfect Dark. Many years ago, when I first discovered emulation, I played so much GoldenEye on Project 64. I was disappointed to learn that the behemoth task of emulating Perfect Dark hadn't been accomplished yet. And so I had nearly forgotten about Perfect Dark until it recently arrived on Nintendo Switch Online. Well, great, I thought, I can finally play this game. But then after spending way too much time trying to get something close to modern FPS controls running on Nintendo Switch Online, which you have to choose control type 1.2, then swap the left and right analog sticks and the Switch button mapping settings, it's a huge hassle. I then discovered that the emulation community had since climbed the Everest that was Perfect Dark, and had cracked that code and you could emulate it. In fact, there's a fantastic custom version of the 1964 emulator that's been optimized just for GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. It even includes buttery smooth mouse injector controls that make GoldenEye and Perfect Dark playable with mouse and keyboard, just like modern FPS games on PC. I cannot adequately state just how much this has improved my experience at these games. You have got to try it. The N64 has never really been an ideal home for first-person shooter games. It's only due to Rare's absolute genius that GoldenEye and Perfect Dark were even remotely playable on the N64. And to be fair, FPS games on any console were a bit of a wild west until Halo's success cemented the dual analog control scheme that we take for granted today. If you had the gumption to try the two-controller setup in GoldenEye, yes, that's one person using two N64 controllers. Rare's GoldenEye is what's credited as one of the earliest prototypes of the dual analog control scheme. Perfect Dark also offered this unique option. Considering the N64's limitations, Perfect Dark is an absolutely breathtaking graphical achievement. I'm especially impressed with the lighting and reflection effects. Most of the environments are very detailed, and of course, by today's standards, Perfect Dark very much shows its age. But you have to give credit where credit's due. It's difficult to compare console FPS games from this era with PC games like Counter-Strike, Quake 3, Unreal Tournament, Deus Ex. They obviously have the edge. Gaming PCs at the time were expensive, but they had 3D accelerators that were unlocking a level of graphical fidelity that consoles just couldn't match at the time. Perfect Dark utilized an upgraded GoldenEye game engine and required the N64 expansion pack, which doubled the available RAM to a whopping 8 megabytes, which seems like nothing to us today. Rare squeezed every last drop out of the aging N64. The only common criticism of the game was the dipping frame rate, which could slow to a crawl in certain sections of the game. Regardless, Perfect Dark was a critical darling swan song for the N64. It was accompanied by a small batch of other successful late releases like Pokemon Stadium 2, Banjo-Tooie, Mario Party 3, Paper Mario, and Mario Tennis. The GameCube would debut barely more than a year later. Truly, Rare's N64 polygons are impressive for the time, all things considered. However, I can't help but conclude that Joanna looks like a British soccer mom ready to cruise the mall so she can show off her $12 pixie cut from Great Clips. I think most fans prefer Joanna's appearance from the 2010 Perfect Dark remake for Xbox Live Arcade. The gameplay feels very similar to GoldenEye, though considerably more polished. If you're using the default control scheme, auto-aim helps to mitigate some of the frustration. The enemy AI is significantly improved from GoldenEye. In the early missions, enemies are slow and easy to mow down, but in later missions, the enemies are nimble and much more bullet spongy. You can push certain objects around, which is cool, very interesting new feature. And like GoldenEye, there are various objectives to complete, as you march through the corridors blasting anything that moves. Night vision and the IR scanner also provide some more variety to the gameplay. Perfect Dark doesn't boast the impressive catalog of guns that GoldenEye had, but there's still an ample collection. I really favored the CMP 150, the laptop gun, or any pair of dual pistols. The cloaking enemies are a great addition, though there's a weird, glitchy, Roblox-looking appearance when they cloak and decloak. I'm not sure if this is some kind of artifact from the emulation I was using, something you just couldn't see on fuzzy CRTs back in the day, or if this is just how Rare designed it. One frustration that carried over from GoldenEye, a common issue with early FPS games at the time, I got lost a lot. It's very easy to get disoriented in these repetitive, low-poly environments. There's nothing more frustrating than not knowing where to go or what you're supposed to do in a video game. I think the level of hand-holding in modern games has really spoiled me. I had to repeatedly reference walkthrough videos just to figure out what to do on some of these missions. It's very easy to miss one small objective at the beginning of a mission, so I probably spent 50% of my total playtime in Perfect Dark just waltzing around aimlessly, not knowing where to go. This is probably something you'd read in a manual, rest in peace paper manuals, but it took me forever to figure out how to ride the air bike. You have to double tap A on the N64 controller. Not very intuitive, but this is necessary to complete a mission. I also had no clue that you could crouch in this game. Turns out you need to crouch to complete the Chicago mission by holding the R button and then pressing down C to cycle between standing, crouched, and prone positions. Again, not very intuitive. The story is a major low point for me with Perfect Dark. And fair warning, there are mild story spoilers ahead. The game begins with an excellent moody vibe and premise. Feels like a serious futuristic spy thriller. I'm really into it. Yet, as the story unravels, it becomes increasingly ridiculous and convoluted. They really lost me with the Area 51 levels. The MacGuffin, essentially, is a stereotypical gray alien named Elvis. So suddenly this cool spy thriller has just plunged into cheesy, pulpy alien cliché. And not only does this alien look flat out goofy, his voice sounds like a bad Yoda impression.
Good to see you, Joanna. Take this. You should find it useful.
And he later wears this patriotic US flag onesie and blue-laced sneakers. What is going on? Now, Rare are no strangers to comedy, so I wouldn't be surprised if they took this tongue-in-cheek detour just for fun. It did feel like a jump-the-shark moment, and it diluted the gritty and mature vibes that this game had been carrying from the beginning. I'm trying to remind myself that Area 51 alien content was massively trendy in the 90s. You've got Independence Day, Men in Black, these wildly profitable films that were probably an influence here. Many other games cashed in on this alien trend, Duke Nukem 3D, of course, Area 51, the classic arcade light gun shooter. Tomb Raider 3 had alien content, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Deus Ex, Vigilante 8, just to name a few. Everybody was tapping into the alien stuff. While the story doesn't do it for me personally, Rare still deserves credit for execution. This is probably the most immersive game on the N64. The animated in-game cutscenes are very well done. They utilize motion capture like they did in GoldenEye. There are loads of dialogue sound bites from Joanna and enemy NPCs, and most of the voice acting is very solid, though a few characters have some borderline cringe voicing. Looking at you, Trent. You can tell that these audio files are absolutely crushed with compression, but considering that every bit of this game's data had to fit on a 32 megabyte cartridge, I think I'm more impressed than disappointed. And like GoldenEye, Perfect Dark has amazing sound effects. Is there any other game where it's this satisfying to reload or pick up ammo? Ka-chak! While I'm not sure that Perfect Dark's soundtrack will have as much longevity as GoldenEye's soundtrack, especially the legendary pause music, which has been heavily memed, Grant Kirkhope and company have brought us another great score. Most of the soundtrack provides effective espionage ambiance and varying levels of intensity, but there's a few tracks that really stand out from the rest. The Institute menu track absolutely slaps. There's Carrington Villa, Chicago Stealth, and the Airbase espionage tracks are a few more favorites. Overall, if you enjoy dipping into classic low-poly FPS games, Perfect Dark is an absolute must-play. Give it a go with the mouse injector controls. You can find a link on my Substack. Thanks for listening to the Retro Mo podcast. As always, I do my best to keep all of my content spoiler-free and rated E for everyone. If you find this podcast enjoyable or helpful, tell a friend and consider giving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. If you have questions or comments, you can send an email to retromopodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Godspeed.